Good evening. We will call this regular meeting of the Fargo School Board to order. We do have an agenda in front of us. I would entertain a motion. Jim?
I move adoption of the agenda as provided with the addition of the HR addendum that was at our workstation under item 5B.
Seconded.
Okay. Motion's on the floor. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor with proceeding in that manner, please vote by saying yes. Yes. Any opposed? No. We will proceed. Recognition of the audience. Nobody did sign up to address the board tonight. So is there anybody in the audience that did not know the procedures that they want us to address the board? Okay. We will move forward. Staff reports. I will turn it over to Dr. Gandhi, who can make some introductions for us.
Sure. I will go ahead and introduce Dr. Denise Jonas, the Cass County Director for CTE, and I know she's going to make a couple of other introductions as well to highlight a great program that we have happening at South High School.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. It's a pleasure to be back in front of the school board. It is CTE month, and I am CTE, so I'm sporting my shirt. If you see me around, I'm a billboard this month for career and technical education, but hopefully this story, and we tell the story every month all the time, so people know and learn about what's happening in Fargo Public Schools and in career and technical education. Tonight we are able to spotlight our automotive technology program from South High School. I'm thrilled to have so many people here to participate in the presentation. What I do want to just thank you and let you know at your table, you have a career pathways document. And this is something that we've been working with Fargo Public Schools and our career development counselors to help organize the information on career education, from Choice Ready to the scholarships to the pathways to the courses that are in our high schools that align with the coordinated plans of study, all in one location. So that is a resource for you and hopefully our community and our schools when they need it. And we also left some treats. So from the bottom of our heart, on Valentine's Day, we thank you for the support you give us in CTE. And with that said, we're going to jump through, and you've seen this slide before in the past. Career and technical education is about awareness, exploration, preparation, whether that's military, whether that's workforce, or that's post-secondary. And we want students to find their passion and develop some of these skills. Some they might use for their life, some they might use for a career. We do align with the strategic plan, and this program really does a great job of using all of these aspects in its program, from leadership to the academics to the partnerships. You will see tonight. You'll just be amazed at what's happening in this program. And I'm really honored because I have talked Mr. Tom Cross into coming and visiting with you. He's a very humble instructor who does amazing things but really doesn't like to talk about them. And one of those important accolades for him is the Director's Award of Excellence that's given to the trade and industry in the state of North Dakota, which is a very competitive field. And he received that in 2015. And so I'm really excited to turn this over to Mr. Cross, and then he will introduce the guest speakers after that. So with further ado, Mr. Cross, I'll give the floor to you.
Hello. I'm not a very good speaker. I'm used to talking to students and not adults, so I'll make this very brief. But I do want to start out saying that every good program, every successful program, has to do with support, great support, and Denise Jonas is that great support. I normally don't, or when I do talk about administrators, I normally don't have very positive adjectives, but Denise is one of those great administrators that show support, and that's what makes CTE in the Fargo or Cass County successful. Okay. The state of the auto program, it's actually really, really good. We got great numbers. We do have Automotive Technology 1, which is a 1-credit course. After you take that, you got Automotive Technology 2, which is a 2-credit course. What's happening next year, we got that preventive maintenance course in, which is a half a credit. So now these young people could come in and kind of experience early on the automotive industry and learn about preventive maintenance on their vehicles. So that's really, really exciting. We do also have a Skills USA program that I've been a part of since I've been a part of Fargo Public Schools, and I'll let my students talk about that a little bit more. So I do have a couple students here. I have Marin Donovan and Nick Ill, so we'll let them come up and speak.
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm an Auto 2 student at Fargo South, and the auto program has helped me move through the different vehicles that I have or have had. One of the most recent major things on my truck that I've worked on has been the fuel pump. That was a very annoying process, but Cross, being a very patient instructor, has helped me through that, guiding me through that. All the lessons and everything that he gives us helps us learn about how to fix our own vehicles and keeps us moving forward on learning how to work on our own vehicles.
Hi, I'm Marin Donovan, and I have been in the Skills USA club for the past 2 years. I joined last year as a junior. I'm actually up there. Did the Parade of Lights last year. We decked out a friend's car on a trailer and built a tree. We've also done a toy drive where we went to Walmart and we picked out a bunch of toys for families. This year we also did clothes for kids. We got snow boots and distributed those to kids in the community. And it's been a great opportunity to help in the community in those ways. It's a great opportunity to be a leader among your peers and figure out how to do stuff like that. I've also been in the auto program for the past 2 years. I'm currently in Auto 2. And it has given me a lot of life lessons. Not only does the auto classes prepare you for potential auto careers, but it prepares you for going into your life. I now know how to change oil in my car, change a tire, identify certain specific problems. So in the future, when I go into a shop, I know what to ask to get fixed and so on. It's been really beneficial. Thank you.
A couple things that I would really like to notice with these two students. Nick is from Fargo North, and so he's a traveler down to the central location. And Marin is not only Auto Tech 2 and Skills USA leader, she's an orchestra, right? Track. AP. So there's an image of CTE that sometimes it's for certain groups of students. And what we want to do is change the image and landscape of career and technical education. That is for all students. And that whether that skill turns into a passion that they use for a career or their life, that they have had the opportunity to travel that journey while in high school. And this is a perfect time, Dale Haroff says this all the time, that they can drive the car before they buy it. So why not, drive CTE, before you invest in it in career and college. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our next community partnerships with as a part of the strategic plan is Ann Pollard from General Equipment, who will make that discussion a little bit more significant of our relationship with post-secondary and business.
Good evening, members of the board. It is an absolute pleasure to be here, not only in CTE month, but just to share. You've heard from students and Mr. Cross the success of not only Mr. Cross, Mr. Prestegard, the Fargo South Auto Program, but I will tell you real facts. I represent General Equipment and Supplies. We are the Komatsu dealer in North Dakota, so we have 4 North Dakota branches. I was traveling today, so I was thinking in my head, who are all the technicians in the shop? And I can name 15 to 20 technicians that have been impacted by the Fargo South Auto Program. Our service manager his name is Ryan Knutson, went through the Fargo Auto program. All the way down to students that we currently have at NDSCS right now attending the Komatsu program have gone through the auto program. So, and on top of the auto program, since it is CTE month, I can name another 15 that have gone through rec engines or that have gone through the Cheyenne diesel program. These programs are no doubt making a difference. And just like Maren said, it's not just for companies like mine that are going to give them a future in the workforce, it's for life skills. Everyone should learn, whether it's building trades, construction, some of those basic things. I want to be able to pull my own toilet, and we can teach kids that, and we can teach them and expose them to that in high school. Some kids, Maren, do you want to be a diesel technician? Because I'm ready to recruit you. Some kids might choose the pathway that I'm looking for, but some kids may not choose that pathway, and that's okay too, because just like she said so eloquently, they've gotten life skills. So what I'm here today is just to talk about community partnerships. And it's not just a partnership that we have with the auto program, it's with Fargo Public Schools. Many of your CTE classes impact our future workforce. Things that we do, job shadows. Nobody told me to job shadow in high school. Had they told me to job shadow, I probably wouldn't have 2 degrees that I do not use today. Nobody pulled me by the ear and said, do you really know what that is? Do you really know what that looks like? We can offer that to students, and students need to know that. You might have a vision in your head of what a diesel mechanic looks like, but I guarantee 4 to 5 hours in my shop, we can give you a better idea of what an all-day, what it might look like for a career. So we can offer students job shadow, business and college tours, always going to different local colleges. NDSCS we have a partnership program with. Work-based learning. We want students to come into our facilities. We want to go into the Fargo South Auto Program. That's an auto program. I can bring my trainer in and I can show them 1 day of diesel and what diesel looks like. What are the differences between diesel and auto? We have those resources. There's a poster up there. Thanks to General Equipment, we were able to give some dollars for the Bruin Bash this past year. Skills USA, you heard Maren talk about Skills USA. Out of their class, 6 of my 7 NDSCS students right now are in Skills USA. They would not be in college Skills USA if they hadn't been in high school Skills USA. Developing leadership, developing skills, developing passions and career path. So internships, career path, just lots of opportunities. And that's what we as businesses need, is a chance to start introducing these students to career paths while they're in great classes at Fargo Public Schools and offering them opportunities and getting to know them and letting them get to know us as a business. Thank you.
We had 5 minutes to prepare, so as a team. So, but I think we're doing a pretty good job. I'm going to go to the next partnership, and we've talked a little bit about this on the fringes of the Fix It Forward partnership that started this year, and Mr. Cross Auto 2 students. And so Jeremy Jensen is here, and he will share about Fix It Forward and our future partners.
I just want to say thank you for having me here, and I want to say thank you to Denise and Thomas for investing in this partnership. This has just been an incredible partnership, I think, for both ends. So we're able to get some cars and some parts over to the auto shop program and hopefully get some real hands-on experience as the kids are going through the classes, and we're able to get more cars fixed for our ministry and get them out in the community. I normally have about half an hour, 45 minutes to talk about the ministry. I'm going to try and condense it into a couple. We started this ministry about 5.5 years ago on a farm in a small private shop. Our goal was to help those in need in the community. You know, Denise talked earlier about passions. My partner and I were both passionate about cars. We like fixing cars. And we wanted to do something meaningful in the community with that passion. So we started our ministry to fix cars for those in need. We started working with the YWCA, and once we connected up with them, they said transportation is the #1 barrier we face for getting people out of the shelters and back on their feet. And that's just echoed with the over 40 partnerships now that we have in the social services, Fargo Moorhead. So we stepped into that and said, we got skills, we have passion, we have a bunch of people who like to work on cars. Let's try and meet that need. So in the last 5.5 years, we've fixed over 500 cars for free for the needy in the community. And we started giving away cars about 3.5 years ago, and as of last week, we've given away 214. And I think, is it the next slide? 4 of those recently have been thanks only due to the Fargo Auto Shop program. So we send these cars over, they do a fabulous job fixing them up, and we get to give away more cars to help those in need in the community get back on their feet. So I just want to say thank you. It's a great partnership, and we're really excited about it.
I think what's amazing sometimes in partnerships is just how they come out of the sky and drop in your lap. We'd actually put in a request. Mr. Cross had asked for $6,000 to buy some demo cars because he didn't have enough to work on in the shop last spring. And in the fall, we were denied. And so it was disappointing, and we really didn't know what we were going to do. At least I didn't at that moment. And then pretty soon I received an email. Hey, have you heard about Fix It Forward? And it was that moment that it was just meant to be. And now we have this ongoing series of cars that they bring to the shop for us and they take away, and our students can fix. And so sometimes in a community you get lucky, and that luck is an amazing experience for our students and learning in the community and the leadership of community service. So I want to thank all our guests that are here tonight. And for all that they do behind the scenes. This is a snapshot of a program that sometimes people don't see because it's hidden way in the back, because it's loud and noisy. And so this kind of is a spotlight on one of those programs that we've had some students coming from the West Fargo schools to participate in as well. So as we continue to share more, there's opportunity for more students to maybe come and participate right on the campus at South High School. I also want to give a shout out to Dr. Todd Birch, principal at South High School. He is always in the corner for us, making sure that we have what we need and approving all the things that go on in the building. So like Tom said, it takes great leaders, and I'm humbled by his comments, but I really want to give a shout out to Dr. Birch for the support he gives in the building to the program and with at the district level. So with that said, I guess you can stop by South High to learn more. And if you have any questions, we can take those now.
Before we take questions, Brandy Auntie was not able to be here tonight, and she was very upset about that, but she has a special message because Ann Pollard is here. And so I'm going to read verbatim what she sent. So Brandy says, the trades are so important. There is a great need now and in the future. Having these programs available in our district are great options for our students. Our son took most of the shop and trade courses available to him. He is currently in the General Equipment Komatsu program at NDSCS and is so involved in their education and supports these students through school and their internships. I'm excited to see the Fargo Public Schools partnership with the trades continue. Thanks, Ann, for all you do, Brandy. Okay, with that, Jim, go ahead.
Do we have a date for the auto show at South, since you invited us to come see?
May 22nd.
Thank you. Well worth attending, and there's usually a reasonable priced hot dog as well.
Okay.
Cook safely with sanitation. That's the facts department I have to worry about now.
Great presentation. Any other questions? Go ahead, John.
I want to second Jim's comments. I was there last year. It's a fantastic opportunity to see some of what we have going on in our district for CTE. And just thank you again, Dr. Jonas, for all of your advocacy for the career technical education in our district and throughout our region and throughout our state. It is very much appreciated.
I will be sending you an email after this that has some federal announcements on future funding for career and technical education. It's very long, but please take a moment to read it. So have a good evening.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, next agenda item is under staff reports is 4B, the academic performance and map data. Looks like Dr. Gross and Ms. Eidnes are going to lead us through it. Dr. Gandhi, would you like to make introductions?
Sure. I think just a quick reminder that this past year we've talked about kind of switching up a little bit of the format instead of just offering academic student performance data in one bucket throughout the year. We are starting to roll those out as we receive the data. Some of the timelines might adjust moving forward as well, but we just I believe last week received the MAP data. So this is kind of a presentation with that piece, and we'll continue that process, and I'll hand it over to Mrs. Eidsness from there.
All right, tonight we're going to look at the MAP data, and we test once a year in the winter, and we're looking at student growth. So from our strategic plan, we're looking at Initiative 1, Student Achievement and Growth. And this is where we do pick a assessment to look at for benchmarking to see where we're at in the district around growth and proficiency. It's also Goal 4, and that's where we do select the assessments, the NDSAs, MAP, and so forth. So as we go forward, this is what we wrote in the strategic plan, that we would monitor grades 3 through 9 and the individual growth target for students on the MAP test annually. And one of the pieces on growth, just to make sure we can talk through that, is the students have to be in your district for 2 testing periods, right, continuous, to get growth. So they had to be with us last year and this year for them to count in that count. And when we take a look at that, if Bob and I both scored 210, let's say that was that score, and then we scored 215, they're taking all the kids in that 210 to see how they did the next year, and they come up with an expected growth. So what we're looking for is which students in our district made the expected growth that NWEA set, to give us a kind of a barometer to take a look at our students as we go forward. So we're going to go through both reading and math for grades 3 through 4. And so as we take a look here, and I think I always like perspective. And so when we think about that, we have about half of our students in 3rd grade that are making the expected growth. And I think the one piece to look at is if the expected growth, for example, was 10 points and someone made 9, they're not counted. So they still could grow, but they didn't make the expected, so it's not going to be counted in that percentage there as we go forward. And then we have 4th grade, and that they have, as we look at that, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, and 9th as we look at that. So we kind of wanted to look overall. Our goal was to have it increase. And so we had 5 out of the 7 grade bands in reading for grades 3 through 9 meet the goal that we had going forward. We're also going to look at math. And so here's our mathematics MAP scores. Also on the test, just kind of a reminder too, it's an adaptive test, which allows the question to change based on if you have the question right or wrong, if it's going to become more difficult or less difficult till you level out at a certain level. And that is something that I guess tests are becoming more dynamic as we go forward with the computerized testing. This is 5th and 6th grade, 7th and 8th, and 9th. And for this goal for math, the Fargo Public Schools met 4 out of the 7 grade bands made increased growth as we go forward. And I think that's where it leads to more discussion. Since we just received the scores last week, we do need to go back and do some analysis of trends and indicators of need. And so what MAP does allow us to do is dig into the data a little bit by category, and also work with what we call our content experts. So our course captains, and Bob or Dr. Gross can help with that too, but what we're seeing is a need for us to, as we do this system of spreading out the data, is also make sure that we are working with the groups to improve our improvement plan. So we're recommending that we take the data, review it with the teaching and learning team, the cabinet, the principals, and then principals to review with their buildings. And then we'd come to the board. So that'd be our goal next year. That's why we might change the date and come a little later, so we have a little more time with the data to talk about some of the needs or what direction we think this helps us in our plan. One of the things is that we are doing lots of things, but we kind of want to be more strategic when we come back to the board to talk about some of the things we're doing and how it matches up with the data. So one of the pieces as we go forward and we're looking at increasing, we do need to remember there's a limit to increasing, if you say increasing every year. And so looking at NWA, what are some of those norms they're saying that we should hit? So Dr. Gross and I were talking, is it that our goal for our students is we'd like to see 70 or 75% of our kids make targeted growth? But I also need to check out, is that reasonable, as we set those goals? And so we do need to do a little more research around that. Would you like to add anything?
And I think, yes, we certainly need to continue to take a look at this data and look for some of those opportunities for improvement. But we also want to stress the things that we're already doing across the system. We've talked many times about our standards-based education model, in which we have our teachers across the system looking at those essential learning outcomes, talking about what that means for all the same teachers in a grade band or a curricular area, how they are then going to use those formative assessments. Let's look at the data today to change instruction tomorrow to help our students be very successful, or as successful as they can be, that then lead to some of these summative or near the end assessments. But also the things that are happening with our professional development. We have been, for the last 2 years, part of a grant called the Circle Grant, and we've referenced that, and we've written articles about that for Journey, in which at the middle school, at Carl Ben Eielson and at South High School, a lot of professional development has been centered around literacy, professional development. How can I have my students do more writing that will help them with their reading? How do we help students at different parts of the day really do some of that sustained silent reading that leads to improved academic support? And we are now in the process of writing a second round of that grant that then would expand beyond just those 2 secondary buildings, but then would have the opportunity to include all staff in some of those professional development opportunities. So as we look at what we're doing now and into the future, this data, along with our state assessment data, our ACT data, and so on, really helps shape the path that we're taking around continuous improvement.
So one question we might have for the board is, as we're trying to make the presentation so the data can be spread out across the years, if there are some pieces that you would like us to make sure we always add to a presentation. And I think that's what Dr. Gross is getting to, is that we'd like to share some of the things that we're implementing that go with that data. Any questions?
Just a comment. Oh, is it okay? Thank you so much, Missy and Bob, for that information. And I would just say that purposeful and strategic and setting a goal, because when I read the strategic plan, it says growth year after year. To your point earlier, what does that mean? And what does that look like? And when I've read information around standards-based grading and targets being 80%, and then individualized maybe learning plans or adjusted learning plans for 20%, those are things I think that are helpful, right? We can be more strategic and targeted and purposeful, and more students than, the hope is, do better. So I think all of the information that you shared is right in line.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming we can drill this data right down to a classroom in a particular building. The professional learning communities that we've created, I'm assuming they're going to get this data, and I'm hopeful, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm hopeful if we see 70% making growth in this classroom and 30% making growth over in this classroom, realizing not every student is the same, that there's going to be some communication going on at the building level, at least, about mentoring that classroom teacher to hopefully get them closer to that 70% target. Am I correct there?
I think that's the power of professional collaboration and the PLCs, the strength that they can provide. When we've been visiting through our teaching and learning team, and how do we help strengthen that, it is that it's building shared leadership with our teachers and administrators together around having that time to be used to help each other. And it's probably some of the most precious time that we have.
And I would just add to that, along with this type of data, I think some of the most powerful conversations around a professional learning community happen on that day-to-day basis. What am I going to be teaching this week? Let's gather some of that data and let's talk about it on a Wednesday so that on a Thursday we can change instruction in the classroom. And from one week to the next, my students might be doing a little bit better. The next week they might not be. But how can I learn from my peers and bring some of those best practices into my own classroom? And I think that's a benefit of what we have done and the commitment the board has given around professional learning communities in our system.
Sure. I think the only thing I would add is, as well as I think it's never going to be as prescriptive as to what is the solution to increase the data. I think conversations such as these happening with our teachers or allowing our teachers, empowering them to have these conversations is where the difference works. Because when you look at education, there's a series of data points, and sometimes data can be spliced in a variety of ways. And we do sometimes face a struggle of when you're only looking at state assessments year after year, a group of students that may have shown enough growth the first year may not show as much growth the next year, and sometimes it is harder. Sometimes it's easier to show more growth if you're starting off at a lower point than it is when you're at a higher point. That's a consideration for us as well. But then secondly, also, I always tell our team, and I know our teachers are aware of this as well, it's look at the continuum of education in K-12 that we provide, because we have state data sometimes year after year where we might say 50% of our students showed growth or proficiency, and there's obviously always going to be room for opportunities of improvement for us, but sometimes that looks like we're not serving 50% of the kids. But then when you look at our 12th grade graduation data and you see as a system we're doing 84% graduation and have the low unemployment that you have in Cass County and not a complaint about our high school graduates coming out with lacking skills, sometimes it's like, okay, which data point do we want to focus on as well? So not always prescriptive of just saying this is working for this teacher or not, but really having that conversation and seeing some of the PLCs at work and empowering our educators is really where some of that transformation happens.
Thank you, President Nelson. A couple of the notes that I've taken down have already been addressed. Same concerns here as when we saw the ACT data just a little while ago, that our goal is for it to be ever increasing, which I get we want to be improving, but is that reasonable? And can we be more focused than that and show better results? A similar concern as with the ACTs, when we see everything grouped together, it can hide real successes and real maybe challenges in the different demographic areas or in the different, as you're pointing out, Jim, different classrooms or different buildings across the, so I don't know if we want to see that here, but if that data is available, I think we would want to be able to have access to that. And I think you addressed this, but I maybe missed it. How is this linked to our standards-based instruction? Are the assessments somehow aligned to our standards-based learning here?
I think with any standardized test, it is just a snapshot in time of how the students are performing. This version of the MAP assessment, or the measures of academic progress, is aligned to the state of North Dakota and their standards. So we can break this down by the different threads or strands, just like we can our state assessment data. So as we take that next step, that deeper dive into the data, it would be looking at those strands, see where there are strengths or areas for improvement, and then also looking at the different demographics areas and categories to say, what do we need to do differently? What do we need to celebrate and continue? But use that data as part of that exploration process.
Just a real quick follow-up on that. So I keep hearing this mentioned along with our state assessment. How does this overlap? Does this overlap with other assessments that our students are receiving in the classroom? What does this provide that maybe, if there are others, those don't, or vice versa?
Right now, under the state statute, we are, one, required to utilize the state standards and then utilize the state assessment system, or the North Dakota State Assessment. And then it also talks about that we are to use an interim assessment similar to the MAP assessment. So this is in fulfilling that component of that statute. Now, there are other interim assessments that could be used, and there are other districts across the state of North Dakota that use another assessment called STAR instead of MAP. But it's another assessment to have additional data points along the way.
Okay. Okay, so as I was listening to Rupak, John, and Bob, was trying to write down reminders of points I wanted to touch on, but one of my questions was going to be around alignment for state and national, really, indicators, because we talked, or we have heard information around the importance of third grade reading and math scores as key indicators for future success in terms of the importance of intervention at that age. And I also see that as part of the state strands. I think that's what you were referring to actually when you said strands. Is that correct, Bob? That would be one of them?
Yes, the
Okay.
assessment can be broken down into the different components of, let's say, mathematics, or the different components of literacy, the different strands.
Yes, okay. And then you also mentioned demographics as well, and being able to, not lump everything together so that we can indeed identify growth for each student or each group that we've identified as needing maybe some other indicator or intervention. And it makes me think of the recent EL that we reviewed in terms of, and it highlights the demographic groups. And so that, I guess, would be then data that would be helpful to be provided there to say, yes, we are, that the growth might not be 100%, correct? I mean, it never likely will be, but can we identify for whichever we've set out to measure that those groups indeed are growing? And so if it's at a 9, well, was it an 8 last year? And so that's really still a success, even though your overall bucket is 50%, right? Because you've really shown growth, or that student has been able to make gains. And so that's kind of, I think, what I'm hearing from you is where we're headed, and I think that's great. Yeah. Rebecca?
My question has to do with what our process would be, because it sounds like we're being asked, the board's being asked for, to provide you with, or administration with some input in regard to what we might want to be seeing. Some of it we've kind of thrown out and discussed a little bit here tonight, but I just wonder if that would be something, would we be formally taking that to, say, governance for some kind of a conversation so that we could more formally agree, I guess, on what the next steps or the recommendations might be?
You could, or you could just kind of tell us, like, right now, I made a note from Jennifer's comments that to make sure we're including subgroup populations when we can in that data. And I think this is just a transition of presenting one overarching student achievement data report to the board to doing it throughout. So this is kind of the first subset as assessments come in. So I think moving forward, we'll look at subpopulation data, but we can have a more formalized conversation, or we can just, we're open to the feedback. Just tell us what you're looking for.
Well, you could end up receiving a lot of requests, and so that'll be up to you to monitor, right, how that comes in. But I would be happy if we were to have a little bit more of a strategic conversation at maybe a committee level, if it's, Robin, if you decide that that's something that we ought to pursue. Thank you.
What I know is that our administration is always very helpful with all of our requests, so I see them busily taking down notes. So, any other questions or comments on this report? Okay. On to the student mobility report, memo number 79, Dr. Gross.
Thank you very much. In your packet is the first semester of this year's mobility report. The report is very similar to what we have shared over the past few years. There are some additional data points that are on the last page, and that is in direct conversation from a similar conversation that we just had around academic performance when it came to this. So hopefully we have provided some of the information that you have requested. As we look at this mobility report, this is for August of 2019 through January 2020, the end of the first semester. When I scroll through this report and just get to some of the data, this is something that we've looked at from year to year, and this would be the data of the number of students who have transferred in to our district by the different grade bands, elementary, middle school, and high school, and those who have transferred out. Like in the past, we give you the previous year, so you can do a compare and contrast on that. You'll see that for this year, there are, approximately 60 more students who came in during that same time period than the year previous, and about 25 more students who transferred out during that same period. But when you combine the 765 and the 985, that just shows you how mobile some of our population is across the system. And just wanted to break that down by grade bands. Then, like we have done in the past, if we are curious where at each of those areas the students are coming to us or going when they leave us, we have provided this data for you. It is broken down by percentages instead of numbers, just because sometimes the number in a certain grouping is so small and might be less than 10, and that might actually lead to being able to identify students. So we've provided you percentages instead of numbers. But you can see from that pie chart as you look at where students are coming to us at the elementary level, that highest percentage is from out of state, not Minnesota or North Dakota, at 32%. And then you can see the different areas there. Like we have done in the past, we've broken down Minnesota into two categories. There's a purple and the green, the purple being Moorhead, the green being the rest of the state of Minnesota. We've done the same with North Dakota, where the red is the West Fargo Public Schools and the dark blue is the rest of North Dakota, just so you can see the percentages who transfer in from our closest neighbors, both those school systems and those states. And then a similar color scheme on students who have transferred out of the Fargo Public Schools at the elementary level. And just like the transfer in, our greatest transfer out is out of state, not Minnesota or North Dakota, at the elementary level at 34%. Have the same data for you when we look at the middle school. Same color scheme, same percentages. As we look at this data, sometimes we ask, why are there so many students who transfer in or transfer out? And probably the answer is it's their family's decision. As a parent receives a position in a company and they move out of our community or are recruited or come to the Fargo area for employment, that's the biggest reason or the reason why we see this. But we do see that we are a very mobile district in the number of students who come in and out. And then finally, on the last page, in looking at those pie charts, here's the same data for high school age students. As we make that comparison and transferring out, the one thing I see here is that out of state, the transfer out is much larger on the high school area than any of the others. Why? I don't have that answer because, again, that is due to those family dynamics and what those families are making some of those choices. But the new data that we wanted to provide for you is on the last page. The last time we shared this data, you asked if we could begin to break this down for grade band and also by ethnicity or demographics. Please know that there are two areas that are blackened out, and that is because the number of students in either one of those is less than 10, and we certainly did not want to provide the data that might identify a student. But you can see for those same areas of those pie charts, the percentage of students one, in each of those grade bands, and then two, by each of the demographic areas, including free and reduced and EL. Then you have a second data chart for your review, which would be now the same review or the same look at the data of students who have transferred out of the Fargo Public Schools. Again, two areas are redacted because of a small subset or small number in each of those categories. And then lastly, request came the last time we looked at this data is, could we look at it by building across the system? So you have three different sets of data. The first set is elementary, with 4 different areas that are blackened out because the cell is small. The middle is our 3 middle school areas, both in and out. And then finally, the last set of data on the right-hand side of the screen or your report would be our 4 high schools. So you have a sense of the ins and out at each of our building, and a sense of the demographic breakdown, or at least a percentage in each of those different categories. So again, wanting to respond to the request for some additional information as we present this now and into the future. So that would be our mobility report.
Thank you. I have a question. So with the in and out transfers, does that include not only physically relocating an address, but also those that maybe pay tuition to come into the district, or is it all-inclusive or only residents?
This would be anyone who is open enrolled into our district. We
Okay.
would count them here. It does not include intra-district transfer. So I am a Centennial student, and we moved to a different neighborhood, and now I am a Lincoln student.
Okay.
That is not reflected in this data.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Jim and Jennifer.
I'm curious on the high school numbers on the bottom right-hand corner there. The transfer out, could that be a dropout? Or is that actually, we know some other school district requested their transcript?
This set of data is just transferring. Thank you. This set of data is the students who are no longer in that school. When we present to you the final mobility report, we will be able to pull that apart of those who another district requested that information, or those who we did not request and are considered a dropout. So right now, those who started with us and who are no longer with us at this time.
So my question had to do with, you mentioned the transferring in and out, we don't know the reason. And so I'm just curious, has there been discussion around surveys, or how would that help if that could be done to try to gather some of that information?
We haven't asked that type of question in the past, just because most of it is really based upon the family dynamics and where someone might have employment. I'm going to guess that 99.9% of that is based upon a mom or a dad getting employment either in our community or someplace out of our community.
Thank you very much for the additional information that we requested. My question is, it looks like we have from this mobility, a net out migration of about 220 students. But we're still forecasting a net increase in our district of 100 students next year. Is that correct? And how do we?
I guess I'll start. Yeah, that is correct, and I think that part of that is as we continue to look at our enrollment projections and with that RSP number as well, we know that we do have a net out migration when we look at our enrollment in October or November versus what we normally have in May as well. So Rob from RSP always goes off of one point in time, October to October comparison, but we also know that we do have that fluidity that happens throughout our district as well.
I just wanted to thank you for the information on the last page of the report. I think it helps us get a little bit of a better understanding in terms of the movement within the schools. So I appreciate that perspective. Thank you for doing that additional work.
And I think, Jennifer, I think if the board wanted kind of that data of the why, I think we could have that conversation. I think I would also have some reservations around, I know sometimes not all families would want to share why they're moving as well. And sometimes the contact doesn't happen directly at the school. Sometimes we have to pick up the phone and say, there's been a certain amount of absences, and then just get the information that we can at that point too. So there would be some challenges on getting good, clean data too on that.
Well, and as I think about that out loud too, that's why I said, would it be even helpful for the district? But as I think through that, is it because there are other courses offered, and so there's a transfer, valuable data, for example, like that, and certainly volunteer, but.
Absolutely, and I think
Yeah.
we would whenever we get that information as well, but yeah, without
Yeah.
a doubt. Yep.
What's the comparison from last year's data to this year's data at this time?
So if we look on the first page that has this chart, you can see kind of that comparison between 19 and 2020.
Thank you for that report. The next item on the agenda is 4D, the FEA report. It looks like we have Heather Guy here tonight. Welcome.
I had to change your battery earlier, so. Yes, thank you. Very brief, we just wanted to give you a quick update on where we are with the negotiations and the contract. Thank you for all the parties. We've been putting it all together with the new language and reviewing. Thank you, Jolene. I know she's not here. Thank you, Doug, for the fact sheet that we have been sharing, trying to help with some of the questions. We are holding 2 meetings. We held one yesterday at South at 4:15 to allow our members to come, see the language, ask questions, clear up any confusions. We'll hold another on Thursday at South at 4:15. We will be doing an electronic ballot for ratification. Our hope is to be done by 5 o'clock on Friday. Happy Valentine's Day. We must have, for our bylaws, a majority of our members. So if by chance people are too wrapped up in Valentine's Day and do not get the vote in, we may have to leave the ballot open for the weekend. But our hope and our goal is to have it closed by Friday at 5. So then we will be in contact swiftly, and hopefully we can move forward. And yay, CTE.
Thank you for that update. I did communicate with President Mastrud, and if we need to call a special board meeting, we could certainly do that to accommodate. So we look forward to the results. Thank you. Superintendent report, Dr. Gandhi.
Sure. Just one quick thing. We have a scheduled board work session on February 21st. I have worked with President Nelson to slightly amend the work session agenda that was on the governance committee. We are going to bump the pre-K-12 steering committee conversation to a later time. I think we just wanted, the agenda was getting a little bit tight, and we want to be able to do our due diligence in some of the conversations that we're having, specifically around that feasibility study. We didn't think the hour that we originally limited it was going to be enough, so we have just made that modification to the agenda. That, and there is inclement weather tomorrow, so we have announced as of 6 p.m. tonight that the district will be closed tomorrow because of the projected weather forecast.
Well, thank you for that. We have the consent agenda in front of us. I would entertain a motion. Go ahead.
I move adoption of the consent agenda with the addition of that HR addendum.
Second. Okay. Motion's on the floor. Any discussion on the consent agenda items? All right, all in favor, please vote by saying yes. Yes. Any opposed, no. Those items are approved. Would you like to take a break, board, or should we move on? I see shaking heads. Move on, okay. Have to hurry up and get home so you can sleep in tomorrow morning, right? Okay, okay, I understand. Business items, 6A, award of approval, construction manager for Lewis and Clark expansion and remodel. Memo number 84. Dr. Gandhi, would you like to introduce that?
Sure. Sorry, I apologize. As you will see, we had the interview process for the construction management company for the Explorer Academy, which is a remodel at Lewis and Clark and the expansion there. We interviewed 3 different companies, and we are making a recommendation to move forward with construction engineers at the negotiated rate of 5.25%.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
I'd like to move that we authorize the administration to enter into a contractual agreement for construction management services with construction engineers for 5.25% fee for the Setting D program at Lewis and Clark Elementary.
Second.
Motion's on the floor. Any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Rodenbacher.
Thank you, President Nelson. So I see with construction engineers, who is the top choice here, they scored a 0 in past performance with FPS. That would lead me to believe that they have not worked with the district before. And are there any concerns with that beyond what was be represented in the rubric?
They have not worked with our district directly before. They, in their interview, they did speak to several school projects that they work with in North Dakota, specifically out in Watford City. They've just done most recently their elementary school and their high school. Given the unique environment of the expansion at Lewis and Clark or the Explorer Academy, they have also demonstrated some experiences in working with the Altru Health System in Grand Forks, where they've done a lot of their projects, and that included some of their work in scope that was very similar, including a sensory gym design and some of the other spaces. So we do know that they do have experiences with public schools in North Dakota. This is just going to be their first opportunity with Fargo Public Schools.
A follow-up on that. So it says in the memo, and you've mentioned now, that there was an interview process, so you have met representatives in person. It wasn't just an RFP package that we've reviewed, but we've actually had a chance to talk with them.
Correct. So we received the RFP packets, and then there was I was not part of the screening process for the 3 companies that were selected for the interviews, and then the 3 companies were called in, and we met with their for the most part, they all brought their entire team that would be part of associated with that project. I was in the interview process. I was not one of the scorers. I know Jackie was, but yeah, we did meet with them face to face.
And if one more question, if I'm not bumping anybody else. I asked this when we selected the architect. Could you clarify what % of what the 5.25% fee is?
Of the cost of the project.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands. Anne Marie, would you please take a roll call?
Benson,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbacher,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
President Nelson.
Yes, motion carries. Item 6B, Core Neighborhood Steering Committee appointments. There's a fairly lengthy memo here from myself and Dr. Gandhi. A little bit of an overview. The City of Fargo is conducting a Fargo Core Neighborhood Master Plan Steering Committee and process. And there are a couple layers that are involved in this, and I'm sure you've all read the memo prior. I did call the city and inquire. I know that 2 board members have already expressed some interest, but there are 2 levels of committees, if you will. One is more in the neighborhoods, and it's really the groundwork. And then the other is they want an overall steering committee. So they have asked for an appointee from the board, Fargo School Board, to serve on that overarching steering committee. They expect to have about 7 meetings throughout the year of 2020. The meetings are about an hour in length during the workday, and that's for the steering committee. I know John Rodenbacher and Brandy have signed up previously, and those, what was explained to me is those are more of the boots on the ground and a lot of the work within the neighborhood. So that might make a difference as to your interest. So with the memo in front of you, I already have been contacted by 1 board member to serve on that steering committee. If there is anybody else that's interested in that, please contact me. That would be an ad hoc committee, and I expect if there is more than one, I might need some help deciding. So, any questions on that, other than, go ahead.
I just have a clarifying question.
Sure.
Because I read it too as layers. And so are we just choosing someone first for the one level of steering? Or are we later going to come back, are being asked to do both levels?
Well, and that's why I had to call.
Yeah.
And so we have been only asked to appoint somebody to the larger oversight steering committee. The separate neighborhood ones, they can decide on their own. So we're only being asked to appoint one person to the lead committee, if you will. Is that helpful? Okay, go ahead.
President Nelson, if it's okay, I'm going to just interject one thing as well. We all, Anne Marie and I also had a chance to talk to the city about this as we got the request that came in. The role for the steering committee for which they're looking at a school board member assigned, they do want someone that's going to look at it in terms of as a school district as a whole. And then obviously I know that everyone has positions in regards to your own community neighborhoods as well. That's what those community pieces are for. But they're really looking for someone that can kind of take an objective stance overall as they're doing this study for the city of Fargo.
Not unlike the school board. So please contact me if you are interested in that. And then we would need formal board approval for the appointment, I assume, according to our policies. Okay. I don't think we need any action on that tonight. Let's see here. An item that was carried forward from the last board meeting that we went a little long. We had an item pulled from the consent agenda, GP 3, 9, and 10. And I believe Board Member Benson asked for that to be pulled. Would you like to go ahead and introduce that, Jennifer?
Sure, yeah, okay. I'll try to refresh everyone's memories. So there were quite a few comments included on this, and so I thought it would be important to take a few moments to discuss them. And specifically first, those really related to our government model policies and the training that we all participated in, or most anyways, I guess, through the Aspen group. And I also had remembered as I read through some of these that maybe some of the disconnect is related to that we all maybe didn't hear the same message because we weren't all able to be there for the entire training. And we also talked about in the future follow up to really tighten up or take some of the recommendations around policies. So I thought that it would be important to discuss it here while we have everyone present and just take a few moments to really hone in on, I guess, what does reasonable progress mean? Because that was one of their highlighted things. That is actually in any governance model something that is included in the definition. And not all of our policies have maybe reasonable progress measurements in them. And we had talked about doing, separate committees to review them all at once, but we really determined at governance some time ago that we would just kind of do it as we monitored. And so I felt like it was important to revisit, are we all on the same page? Because I felt like walking away and reading through the summary that we were, and there were principles, and I quoted them in here. They're not my words, they're what I walked away from or what was even in the summary reports. And so I wanted to start there anyways, I guess, and talk about that. So if anyone has something to add or feel differently about the messaging, let me just get back here through my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything I wanted to highlight under governance. I really think, I'll just make one more comment, and then if where I'm getting at with that is there was a lot of overlap that Gary and Linda said we had in terms of some of our results in ELs, and we could really work to talk about student outcomes and measurements being really what we're measuring in our results policies so that they're purposeful. And that's for our students' benefit, right? And then it's a clear direction for everyone. And really, at the end of the day, this conversation around governance and operation, and it's the board delegating operations to the superintendent. But if we don't know what that reasonable progress measurement is, or if he doesn't, it becomes then hard to say, what are we really evaluating?
I would like to have this discussion with a motion on the floor to help us focus our discussion. And so I'm going to move that we accept GP3, 9, and 10 monitoring.
Second.
Thank you for that point of order. The motion's on the floor. Let's continue to discuss. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Well, the process usually is that the comments for possible action go to governance for discussion, and I think that's a good process, you know, probably where this is gonna, I would suggest it land again, but there certainly are board members that made comments of concern or question and that don't serve on governance. So, you know, if, for those of us that serve on governance, we can refer to our own comments and have that discussion at that committee meeting easily, but I guess, so I would share my, you know, comments at that governance committee meeting, but I guess I'm wondering for those that maybe aren't on governance, is there some direction or, you know, suggestion to help us maybe better understand when we deal with it at that committee level, if that's what the intent would be?
You know, in preparing for the meeting tonight, I did, and through Anne Marie's help, did find the notes from a work session that I happened to call in on, and and I brought copies for everybody. And it looked to me like we kind of had some decisions, and it was February 26th. And I'd be happy to pass those out if it's helpful. And just kind of what the board, and I phoned in, so, and this is when you were the board president, so a little bit different, well, I can't say I didn't see the expressions when I was there, but if this would be helpful, would you like me to hand it out? Just to, okay. Do you? Okay. And I don't know if it's helpful or not in this conversation, but this, I think, is where, from what I can, try to connect the dots where we left off. Go ahead, John.
Based from Rebecca's comments, I just want to follow on to those and say that even if you are not appointed to serve on a committee, all board members, as well as the public, are welcome to every committee meeting. They are open meetings, and all board members can request topics be put on our agendas, and all board members present will typically be invited to add their comments where they're needed. So if this is something that we want to take the conversation to governance, I would want to make sure that everyone who is not serving on governance knows that they are absolutely welcome there, and that they should hopefully be there if there's something that's pertains to something they're concerned about.
And likewise, I'm happy to bring any comments and forwards too as well. Go ahead.
So I'd like to clarify that, because I know that we can attend, but we're not always, the discussion isn't, you're not always, I don't want to say allowed, but you're not always, you're sometimes discouraged from speaking. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page if that's the case.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. I don't see any other hands. Anne Marie, roll call, please.
Benson.
Are we just voting to accept the report?
Correct.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes.
Brian Nelson.
Yes.
Paulson.
Yes.
Rodenbiker.
Yes.
Ulrich.
Yes.
President Nelson.
Yes, motion carries. Under board reports, we have the statutorily required superintendent evaluation. And I know that Anne Marie sent this out electronically, but she was also so kind to give us some hard copies, so I will pass those out. Those are due, Anne Marie?
February 21st,
February
please,
21st.
and then it'll go to governance and then to your first meeting in March.
Okay. Any questions on that? All right. Committee liaison and correspondence report. Let's start with Mr. Paulson tonight.
Oh, Well, I had to leave early with the last meeting, so I really haven't, it's been a long time since I made a report. I have visited my schools. I visited Centennial last. I've been trying to set up a time when I can get to their PTO. Unfortunately, their PTO usually meets on the evenings when we're having board meetings. It looks like March 3rd is the next one, so I should be at the next one. Other than that, I think we consumed a lot of time with negotiations, and I'd like to thank my colleagues on the board and the FEA for finally getting it together and putting together a contract, I think that's going to be fair to us all, and I hope that we set at least a baseline for our future negotiations so we can work more collaboratively and accomplish things in a more, I don't want to say friendly spirit, but a more congenial atmosphere. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer?
I was just looking back at my notes. I believe I shared Health Insurance Committee last time because our next meeting is next week. So I think I covered that. And upcoming, there wasn't an eggs and issues this month, so light report until next time.
On the 29th, I attended the Communications Committee meeting. On the 31st of January, it was, I was there more as a parent, but I have to call out the annual Claire Barton Hawthorne Ice Skating Classic, as it's an absolute treasure in our district, and I am so jealous of all of our students that learn how to ice skate. I never did, and so it's just a wonderful event. On the 3rd of February, we did meet with the FEA, and we did come to a final tentative agreement on all topics. As Heather mentioned earlier, right now the FEA is meeting with their membership. We're anxious to hear the results from that, and we're all hoping that their membership ratifies the contract. Once the association notifies myself or Rob and I would anticipate we will be in contact, I'm sure, with Anne Marie to try and get a special meeting of the board together next week so that we can do our part and sign this contract as soon as possible. Once we vote and hopefully come to an agreement on this, then the background logistics start of Doug and the other administration handing out contracts and having all the different changes that impact the school's rollout from that point. And then Friday of last week, I did attend the annual ND-SBA negotiation seminar in Bismarck, which was an excellent event. Instead of being at the Ramkota this year, it was at Bismarck State College in an absolutely gorgeous conference room. I loved the venue. Very good session, and I know more about negotiations than I had ever thought I would in my life at this point. So thank you all. That's my report.
Rebecca, go ahead.
The Communications Committee meets Wednesday, February 26th at 7:30 a.m. We will have some suggested names, purpose, and means to review at that meeting that we've been working on for quite a while. The Native American Commission met last Thursday. I found it interesting. We had a presentation. Someone came from NDSU. They're working on a land acknowledgement statement that will be utilized at the university. I'm not really quite sure what the time frame is, but they wanted to ask the Native American Commission members. They provided us with two different statements, and they were just looking for our feedback in terms of what statements would be appropriate or not. And so they said, as a land grant institution specifically, they felt it important to acknowledge the land in which we reside, and that part of the cultural belief is that this would be approved by the local tribal members and community elders. So they were taking that statement to the Native American Commission as a part of that process. And I'm looking forward to seeing where that lands and how they're looking to incorporate that statement into the university, whether it's opening up at various meetings, utilizing that statement and acknowledging that the land, that it's on indigenous land, like our school district land is. So any rate, once I find out what that statement is and a little bit more about the plans for usage, I plan to share it with us as a district and see if there's anything that we feel might be appropriate to be incorporating. We have nominated Sharon Whitebear for a YWCA Woman of the Year. She's someone that was involved with the Native American Commission that from the very beginning. Valentine's Day is the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples March. And at 10 a.m., there's a water ceremony downtown. At 11 a.m., at the Federal Building, a march starts. And that, it kind of works around downtown and ends at the Plains Art Museum with a potluck at 1 p.m., 1 or 1:30 p.m. I've mentioned previously that I was at Ben Franklin for their musical practice. It was fun to watch. So they're doing Schoolhouse Rock, and I was there for about an hour and a half watching. And they were choreographing. And so, I mean, a lot changed even from the beginning of that practice till the end in terms of how they were able to, you know, get all their steps down. So that was really fun for me to watch. Let's see, and the Giving Hearts Day presentation yesterday, I know a few of us were at that at Carl Ben, but I thought that it was hard for me, well, and I know my group too, was talking about the presentation scoring guides where we rated collaboration and understanding, critical thinking, presentation, and communication. And some of the kids were just, well, they were all great, but just fun to watch the kids lead, you know, and present and kind of think about like, well, I wonder what this child might be doing when he or she gets, you know, into a work profession. So one of the groups that took third place was the Great Plains Food Bank, and so that was one of the groups that we evaluated. And tonight, actually right now at the Shields Arena, all Fargo hockey programs are part of the Stick It to Cancer fundraiser that's been going on in Fargo for 10 years. And so there is a large silent auction going on, and there is a lot of hockey going on at the arena. I suppose the boys will be playing by the time we get done. The girls started at 5:15. So, but a nice job to our hockey players and parents and kids for organizing all of that. It's a lot of work. I'll be over there to help clean up tonight. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's do Brian Nelson, please.
I attended the North Dakota NDSBA negotiations conference last Thursday and Friday, and it was, you did a good job, Jim, in presenting your information. Having been a seasoned board member all these years, I thought you provided a lot of great information for all the new board members and that. And President Nelson, I appreciated all your questions that you had at that event as well. And then I have a planning meeting this Thursday, I believe, the 13th. And attended the Ronald McDonald Sweetheart Ball on Saturday as well for a fundraising event for Ronald McDonald House. It did quite well, so.
Very good. Christy.
I also was at NDSBA's negotiation seminar on Friday. I took in the negotiations FEA meeting, and we have planning committee on Thursday. Friday is Giving Hearts Day, and the Fargo Public Schools Foundation is a part of that, and they are raising funds for critical needs, and they have a $50,000 match. So if you have it in your heart to contribute, take a look at FPS Foundation.
Jim.
I had a pre-K-12 steering committee meeting since we last met. Had a North Dakota State School Boards Association board meeting in conjunction with the negotiation non-renewal conference. And much like Rebecca and Robin got to have a little bit of it, and Rupak was there as well. Had a lot of fun yesterday over at CBE. Contrary to what some people have put on social media, school board members do go to the schools occasionally. And I attended the negotiation seminar, and I think that was it.
Very good, thank you. I went to Jefferson PTA. One of the things that I learned is, contrary to what I believed in the past, their parents and their parent body prefers things digitally shared, so they can interpret in different languages. So that was very surprising to me, but that was a passionate group of parents and teachers over there. Also was at Hawthorne and Eagles. As Jim and Rebecca mentioned, I was at CBE to judge the project-based learning, as was RUPOC. That's always a fun thing to do every year. And for a little bit of background, this team, middle school team, picks different charities that are involved in Giving Hearts Day, and they talk about how to promote those, and they do that as a team. So they have 3 or 4 kids on each team to do that. So it was quite fun. I was in Bismarck, as mentioned, last week for NDSBA. Cass County Commission meeting, I know some of us were there, and that was related to the Career Workforce Academy discussion. That was on January 21st. January 22nd, we were in the negotiations meeting. I can't even read my own typing there. I did meet with President Mastrud a little bit about some just direction after this negotiation, or this contract is approved. She did talk to me about some possible ad hoc interests. They have some interest in possibly having a board member appointed to the safety committee. So I did request that that's on the governance committee as well, or governance agenda as well. And the other committee meeting that I attended was the governance committee. So I did pass out Anne Marie's president's report for your viewing. Lots of work coming up here. I'm not going to read it to you, but most important is what I feel, and I am quite sure our most important job, and that is Dr. Gandhi's evaluations. So we look forward to that. Other than that, our next meeting, regular meeting, is February 25th. There being nothing else on the agenda, we are adjourned.